Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning everyone. Mon nom est Steven Guilbeault. I am the Canadian Minister of Heritage. Très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui avec mes collègues et amis, le député de Aylmer, Greg Fergus, et the Minister of the Environment, the Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson. Alors, sans plus tarder, je cède la parole à Greg. Merci.
Merci Steven et bonjour tout le monde. Welcome everybody. Good morning. Je m'appelle Greg Fergus, je suis le député de Aylmer et aussi le secrétaire parlementaire pour au ministre, président du Conseil du Trésor puis la ministre du gouvernement numérique. Ça me fait un grand plaisir de vous accueillir ici et j'aimerais reconnaître que nous sommes situés sur le territoire algonquin, la nation Anishinaabe, et nous sommes très reconnaissants d'être sur leur territoire non cédé. Nous sommes sur le point de commencer et je vous invite donc à prendre votre place, à vos places. J'aimerais commencer par vous rappeler les protocoles de la COVID-19 que nous avons mis en place lors de l'événement aujourd'hui. Toutes les personnes présentes aujourd'hui doivent porter un masque couvrant le nez, le menton et la bouche lorsqu'elles se trouvent à l'intérieur du musée. Veuillez respecter toutes les mesures de distanciation physique. Et de plus, nous avons des distributeurs de désinfectants pour les mains et des toilettes à votre disposition pour vous laver les mains. Thanks for your cooperation to ensure that today's event runs smoothly and safely. It is great to be here at the Museum of History with two of my good friends, Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister for the Environment and Climate Change, Canada, and of course, Steven Guilbeault, the Minister for Canada. We are here to discuss a really important subject, an important topic for the people of my riding, and I dare say for the people of Canada. My constituency is situated right here on the beautiful Ottawa River, to the east, the Gatineau River, and right through downtown Hull, le ruisseau La Brasserie. Et nous, et comme plusieurs personnes, j'ai le plaisir de participer aux corvées pour nettoyer les littoraux des rivières. Nous trouvons toutes sortes de plastiques dans nos rivières et cours d'eau, des pailles, des sacs, des mégots de cigarettes et bien d'autres choses encore. Et nous savons que ce n'est pas un problème isolé ici dans la région de la capitale nationale, c'est un problème qui touche tout le Canada et le monde entier. Et c'est certainement une question importante et c'est la raison pour laquelle je suis très heureux d'être ici présent à l'annonce d'aujourd'hui. So at this time, I would like to turn it back over to our MC, Minister Steven Guilbeault, to officially start up this event. Steven, la parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup, Greg. Alors, merci d'être avec nous, comme Greg le disait, dans le magnifique musée de l'Histoire. Très heureux donc d'être ici avec mes collègues, le ministre Wilkinson et Greg Fergus. As Greg mentioned, we're here to talk about an important challenge, both for our environment and our economy, plastic pollution. From coast to coast to coast, we are seeing the impact of plastic in our oceans and natural environment. We've all seen the heartbreaking images of whales with their stomach full of plastic bags and turtles choking on straws. Chaque année, les océans recevraient 8,5 millions de tonnes de plastique. Chaque année, les Canadiens jettent plus de 3 millions de tonnes de déchets plastiques. It's a huge environmental, economical, and social problem. All of the plastic has value, and it has been lost when we throw it into the trash. Lors de la dernière campagne électorale, notre gouvernement s'est engagé à mettre en place une réglementation pour régler le problème de la pollution plastique. En mettant en place cette politique, nous donnons aux Canadiens et Canadiennes les outils pour réduire les déchets plastiques nocifs et protéger leur environnement naturel de la pollution. Nous le ferons en créant des emplois et en encourageant l'économie circulaire. C'est important de se rappeler la base de tout ça. On l'a oublié, mais les 3 R, et évidemment, ce qui vient à la base des 3 R, c'est la réduction, ensuite la réutilisation, et à la fin de tout ça, le recyclage. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Minister Wilkinson to tell us more about today's announcement. John.
Thank you very much, Steven. Bonjour, tout le monde. J'aimerais commencer par reconnaître que nous nous trouvons sur le territoire du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. Merci d'être ici. Nous vivons dans une période extraordinaire. La pandémie de la COVID-19 a causé beaucoup de pertes, d'incertitudes ici au Canada et ailleurs dans le monde. La priorité absolue de notre gouvernement est de maintenir la santé et la sécurité des Canadiens, notamment en soutenant les familles et les entreprises qui sont en difficulté. But Canadians expect their governments to be capable of addressing the COVID issue and addressing other challenges at the same time. Canadians expect that their government will take important actions that are required to protect their environment, including the threats posed by pollution. Plastic pollution threatens our natural environment. It fills our rivers, our lakes, and most particularly our oceans, choking the wildlife that live there. Canadians see the impacts that pollution has from plastics and microplastics, even in the northernmost regions of this country. Today, the federal government published the final science assessment on plastic pollution. The science assessment found that plastic is causing significant harm to wildlife, particularly marine life, who often ingest plastic or become entangled in it. Microplastics are everywhere, in food, in bottled water, in tap water, both indoor and outdoor air. And the long-term potential health effects of microplastics are not yet clear. And the problem is getting worse. Action is needed to ensure plastic is kept out of our environment. Canadians throw away about 3 million tons of plastic waste every year, which is equal to 570 garbage bags full every minute, every day, and only 9% of that plastic is presently recycled. The rest goes to landfills or into our environment. Just last week, I met with a constituent named Randy. He was a group of marine operators who had just undertaken a marine debris cleanup on the northern coast of British Columbia. He said he's worked off the coast of Vancouver and the coast of British Columbia for 33 years, but he couldn't believe the amount of plastics that they collected on this expedition. In just a little over a month, they collected over 125 tons of plastic waste. Canadians like Randy expect their governments to take action to protect the natural environment by addressing the issue of plastic pollution. Les Canadiens jettent environ 3 millions de tonnes de plastique chaque année, soit l'équivalent de 570 sacs poubelles remplis de plastique chaque minute, chaque jour. Malheureusement, seulement 9% de ce plastique est actuellement recyclé, tandis que le reste se retrouve dans les dépotoirs et dans notre environnement. Ce plastique représente une perte de valeur d'environ 8 milliards de dollars. On estime que chaque année, 29 000 tonnes de plastique polluent l'environnement rien qu'au Canada. Previously, the federal government, working with the provinces and territories, had established the goal of zero plastic waste by 2030. Aujourd'hui, je suis heureux d'annoncer notre approche pour atteindre l'objectif de zéro déchet plastique au Canada d'ici 2030. Un plan pour maintenir le plastique dans notre économie et hors de notre environnement. Today, I am very pleased to announce our government's approach to achieve zero plastic waste in Canada by 2030, a plan to keep plastic in our economy and out of our environment. This is a comprehensive approach that looks directly to address the most harmful single-use plastics while improving the way that we manage other plastics throughout their life cycle. Today, we are releasing a discussion paper relating to the government's plan to address plastic pollution. One important part of this plan is a ban on harmful single-use plastics that have 3 key characteristics. They are harmful in the environment, they are difficult or costly to recycle, and there are readily available alternatives. The proposed ban will address plastic checkout bags, straws, stir sticks, six-pack rings, cutlery, and foodware made from hard-to-recycle plastics, particularly expanded polystyrene. Regulations with respect to this ban will be finalized by the end of 2021. When a ban comes into effect, your local stores will be providing you with alternatives to these plastic products, like reusable or plastic bags, paper bags in place of plastic. Un élément clé de notre plan est l'interdiction des plastiques à usage unique qui sont répandus dans notre environnement, difficiles à recycler et pour lesquels il existe des alternatives. Par exemple, les sacs en plastique, les pailles, les bâtonnets de mélange, les porte-canettes, les ustensiles et les plats fabriqués à partir de plastique difficile à recycler. Beyond a ban on these specific items, we must ensure that we are moving towards circularity with respect to the large number of other plastic items we utilize in our day-to-day lives. I know it is presently hard to come back from the grocery store without a single-use plastic item, particularly around packaging on food. You use it, you throw it in the recycling bin, and more often than not, it ends up in a landfill. This has to change, which is why we will be working with grocers and industry leaders and with provinces and territories to keep more plastic in our economy through recycling. Certainly many leading firms, including companies like Canadian Tire, Loblaws, and Walmart, have made addressing plastic pollution a key focus of their sustainability efforts moving forward. Industry generally has been very much encouraging government this important issue. To ensure we keep much more of our plastic in the economy, we are proposing to develop regulations to establish higher standards for plastic products and packaging recyclable. This could include a minimum requirement of recycled content in new products and greater responsibility for producers and sellers to collect and recycle plastics. This will spur investment in recycling infrastructure, it will drive innovation in product design, and it will generate revenue. It will also reduce emissions and create up to 42,000 direct and indirect jobs across this country. In fact, Alberta's announcement yesterday of its aim to become a centre of excellence for recycling underlines precisely this opportunity. Personal protective equipment has been critical to keeping Canadians safe during the pandemic, particularly our frontline healthcare workers. I want to be clear, a ban on single-use plastics will not affect access to PPE or any other plastics used in the medical environment. However, we did discuss pollution considerations relating to PPE at the Canadian Council of Environment Ministers meeting earlier this summer, and we committed with the provinces and territories to working together and with industry to ensure that we can properly dispose of PPE so that it does not end up in our natural environment. We are also investigating solutions to recycle PPE where it is safe to do so and at options to make some of the PPE biodegradable. COVID-19 a créé de nombreux défis, mais elle a aussi une occasion de réfléchir aux questions importantes auxquelles notre société est confrontée et de travailler pour faire en sorte que nous reconstruisons mieux. Cela signifie créer une économie et une société plus forte, plus durable et plus résistant qu'auparavant. C'est précisément à ce que permet une approche circulaire de l'économie. J'encourage tous les Canadiens à participer à cette réflexion et donnant leur avis sur le document de travail d'ici le 9 décembre. Le document de discussion est sur le site d'Environnement et Changement climatique Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, together through our collective efforts, we can and will create a greener, more sustainable, and more prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Jonathan. This announcement is certainly demonstrate how serious our government is when it comes to tackling plastic pollution. But this plan is not just about a ban. It's a whole approach focused on ensuring more plastic is recycled and asking the producers of these plastic materials to be responsible for cleaning them up. It's about government doing what we have to do, and it's also about us as citizens. And if you would allow me just a second. Comme tout le monde, j'ai toujours avec moi mon sac à dos, et dans mon sac à dos, je traîne depuis des années ce petit kit d'ustensiles réutilisables de façon à réduire à mon échelle, et j'ai même des baguettes pour le fan de sushi que je suis en bois, compostable évidemment. Donc, ce qu'on fait ce matin, c'est de montrer comment l'industrie peut faire sa part, comment les gouvernements peuvent faire leur part, et comment nous, en tant que citoyens et citoyennes, nous pouvons faire notre part. Alors, ceci conclut la partie formelle de l'annonce. Le ministre Wilkinson va maintenant prendre vos questions. Merci.
fonctionne? Oui. On va après au téléphone. Il y aura une question et une suivie. We'll start with questions from media now. We'll start with the ones in the room, and then we'll go to the telephones. There'll be one question and one follow-up. Thank you.
Flemish of GCBC. You mentioned a few larger companies and saying board with doing this, but I think the question for a lot of small businesses is how are they going to handle this in the context of COVID-19? So many people taking takeout. What do you say to those small businesses who are obviously struggling a lot, that they will now have to, or soon have to, have alternatives that are more expensive for them and for their bottom line?
Well, I would say a couple things. Is this on? All right. I would say a couple of different things. The first is the ban is 6 items. So let's be clear. The vast majority of plastic items will remain. The issue there is to enhance the recycling rate, which presently in Canada is about 9%. In Europe, the target is 90%. To look at things like enhancing recycled content to ensure that we're actually keeping the plastics that we need in our everyday lives in the economy and not in the environment. With respect to the 6 items, we looked at that from the perspective that these are things that are harmful in the environment, they are things that are difficult or costly to recycle, and that there are readily available and affordable alternatives. And for each of them, that is true. There are many places in this country that have gone down the path of banning plastic, and there is a readily available alternative in the form of paper bags. There are also obviously reusable bags, some of which been used during COVID. But there are readily available alternatives. The same thing with the rings on 6-packs of beer. I mean, most of the beer industry has already moved away from that and moved to hard caps on the top of them, which are recyclable. So what I would say is we've been very sensitive to trying to ensure that this can be done in a very much affordable way for all businesses. But at the end of the day, Canadians expect us as governments to take action on an issue that they know is an important one for them. And to be honest with you, Canadians are far ahead of their governments on the plastic issue. They've been demanding this kind of action for a long time. Oui. L'interdiction, c'est un petit partie de notre plan. Le plan, c'est d'améliorer le recyclage et les autres choses pour assurer que le plastique reste dans l'économie et pas dans l'environnement. Mais avec la liste de produits qui sera interdit, c'est une liste où il y a les alternatives qui sont affordables et nous avons pensé de ça très fort pour assurer que les entreprises et les Canadiens peuvent avoir le choix, mais c'est abordable pour eux.
So several industry groups are very resistant to the idea of putting some of these plastics and being, banned through, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when so many people are worried about hygiene, right, and using these plastics a little bit more often. The timeline, I imagine, is the same by the end of 2021. I guess, how do you get industry on board for this? You say there are consultations, but there is pushback from industry groups as well.
Well, let's be clear about that too. I mean, first of all, I do take issue with the point of hygiene. I mean, we have certainly considered that in the list, which is 6 items, and there are readily available alternatives that hygiene is not an issue. So we have thought about that quite thoroughly. But I would say with respect to industry, there are kind of two I guess, components to that. The first is the vast majority of folks who actually sell the products into the market are fully on board with where we're going. And, I've met with Walmart and Coca-Cola and Canadian Tire and Unilever and a whole range of folks that are very much on board with this approach. There are some who have expressed concerns, particularly in the fabrication of plastics, with respect to the label in the Canadian Environmental Protection Act in what's called Schedule 1 with respect to toxics. And what I've said to them very clearly is we are open to a conversation. The point of the Schedule 1 in the Canadian Environmental Protection Act is to ensure that we can regulate substances that are harmful to the environment. And greenhouse gases are listed on Schedule 1. In the context of the way people think about the word toxic, greenhouse gases are not toxic, but they are harmful in the environment. And if the issue is a nomenclature issue, we're willing to engage that conversation. But the fundamental issue around pollution remains, and we need to address it.
Hi, Minister. Noah Richardson with CTV National News. I wanted to ask you about the COVID-19 pandemic, and to follow up on my colleague's question. Many Canadians, as a result of restaurants being closed for indoor dining at various periods, turned to takeout and single-use plastic. So I'm just wondering about the COVID-19 pandemic and the increase, perhaps, in some of these single-use plastics, and whether or not that was taken into account when you were coming up with the list, and sort of what assessment was done to come up with those 6 items.
Absolutely. We have considered that very, very carefully. And so I think what, again, I would say is people need to be very careful in sort of looking at the list. So in the context of takeout, the focus is really on polystyrene, which is a very difficult substance to recycle, and it is one that we find quite widely in the environment. Many of the restaurants that do takeout have already transitioned away from polystyrene to other forms, whether it's cardboard or different forms of paper, which are recyclable. And so what we're saying is, absolutely, there are lots of things that are going to have to continue to be single use, but they need to be the kinds of things that we are able to recycle, that we are able to keep in the economy, and not end up in the environment where they cause problems with respect to marine life, but problems, to be honest, with respect to the breakdown in the microplastics, where we don't even yet know the ultimate impacts of what that's going to be.
As a follow-up, I want to ask about what's not on the list. So prior to the pandemic and many Canadians, working from home, a lot of Canadians would start their morning perhaps at a drive-through, McDonald's or Tim Hortons, to get a coffee to take to work. Coffee cups and coffee lids are not on this list. We know that companies like Tim Hortons make their lids out of material that is very difficult to recycle. So I'm wondering why that wasn't taken into consideration, considering we see so many plastic takeout cups, coffee cups, and lids in landfills.
And I think that's a very good question. We certainly looked at that issue because it is certainly one that is top of mind for folks. But that product is something that I think can be done in a manner that actually is recyclable, and that's part of the work that we are going to need to do with industry in terms of enhancing product design to ensure the recyclability of some of these products. And that is certainly something that is part of our plan moving forward. Nous avons pensé beaucoup sur les produits qui sont sur la liste et les tasses pour le café qui sont unique usage, c'est quelque chose qui est très important, mais on peut fabriquer ces produits dans une manière qu'on peut faire le recyclage. Et nous voulons travailler avec l'industrie pour assurer que le design des produits sont faits dans une manière où on peut faire le recyclage. C'est quelque chose qui est dans notre plan pour discuter avec l'industrie.
Michael Couture with Global National. Minister, I want to ask you a question, and Mr. Guilbeault, I'll have a little bit for you here as well. What do you say to environmental groups who say this is just only 6 items, it doesn't go far enough? And to Minister Guilbeault, as somebody who in a previous life used to call on governments to do a lot more, as if you could take off your ministerial hat for a second and say to me, in your previous life, what would you have said to only 6 items being banned by a government?
So let me take a cut at that first, and then I'm sure Steven has some things to say. I think it's very important that people don't focus too much just on the ban. This is a comprehensive plan. It is a comprehensive plan that is focused on creating circularity with respect to the use of plastics, keeping them in the economy and not in the environment. That means enhancing recycling rates. It means making producers responsible for the collection and recycling of their products. It means recycled content standards. And to be honest, I mean, we are not leading the world in this. This is exactly the same kind of approach that many countries in Europe, including the United Kingdom, have gone down this path, and we've certainly learned from the work that they have done. The ban is really on those things that are very difficult to recycle, and therefore we feel that they should be taken out of circulation. But for the rest of plastics, plastics are very useful, and we all use them. We just need to make sure that we're not throwing them in the landfill or dumping them in the ocean. We need to ensure that they stay in the economy, and that is exactly what this plan is aimed to do.
I actually don't take off my my environmentalist hat very often, so this was very. I mean, I was very happy to assist Jonathan whenever I can on any subject. I think he's totally right. I mean, it's not about the issue of plastic is not about simply banning, but a more holistic approach about this concept of circular economy. We need plastic for so many different things. The idea is to, as he's just explained very clearly, is to ban those that we can't reuse or recycle, and to ensure that those that we can recycle are recyclable to a level that's way over 9%. And I think, I can't speak for my ex-colleagues as environmentalists. I'm sure you'll talk to them, but I think many will be pleased by this holistic approach. So yes, we need to ban those that we can't reuse or recycle, and let's work on ensuring that those that can be recycled, so that they can be reused and reused again, that it happens. And by rule of thumb, it's much easier to recycle something than to create it from natural resources, from scratch. So from an environmental point of view, from an energy point of view, from a natural resource point of view, this idea of being able to recycle more and more is one that we should strive for as much as we can. Jonathan spoke about, the European Union heading towards 90%. I think there's clearly room for Canada to improve on this front. Non, je ne crois pas du tout que c'est trop timide. Je pense que notre approche est une approche globale. Alors, il faut éliminer de la circulation les produits qui ne sont pas recyclables, donc comme ces produits-là à usage unique, et les remplacer par des produits qui sont recyclables. Ce concept-là d'une économie circulaire où l'idée, ultimement, c'est qu'un déchet, dans un avenir pas trop lointain, ça n'existe plus. Que tous les produits que nous utilisons, nous puissions soit les recycler, soit les composter, soit les réutiliser. Et c'est vraiment ce que Jonathan présente aujourd'hui, cette approche-là. On parle évidemment de ces 6 produits-là qui vont être bannis parce qu'on ne peut pas les recycler, mais ils vont être remplacés par des produits qui sont réutilisables, qui sont recyclables.
Just as a follow-up, Minister Wilkinson. Doesn't seem like it's a good rate, and that European. What's Canada's goal for recycling rate, and why haven't we talked about it yet?
So, is that on? I don't think it's on. Okay, there we are. So that's exactly what the point of the discussion paper is. The discussion paper is obviously to have a conversation not only with Canadians generally, but also with provinces and territories who have a significant role to play in the management of waste, about what the appropriate targets should be on the pathway to zero waste by 2030. And so we're going to be working through that. But obviously, the fact that European countries believe that 90% is quite feasible is an appropriate place to start in terms of level of ambition. So, so that's a conversation that we will be having with Canadians over the coming number of months.
Bonjour, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Juste pour comprendre, c'est à partir de quand exactement que ces 6 produits vont entrer en vigueur? Puis c'est pas ma question, c'est juste pour une clarification. C'est 2021, c'est ça?
Nous voulons avoir la réglementation en place par la fin de 2021. OK.
Donc, ça vous donne encore une autre année. Vous allez faire des consultations. Vous n'avez pas déjà consulté? Je veux dire, pourquoi est-ce qu'on a besoin d'attendre encore un an? C'est pas un peu timide?
Oui, nous avons complété le rapport sur la science aujourd'hui. C'est le final rapport aujourd'hui. Et nous avons dit que nous voulons avoir une conversation durant le prochain 2 mois. Mais après ça, il y a un processus de réglementation. Nous devons avoir, je ne sais pas comment est-ce qu'on dit ça en français, mais CG1 et après ça, CG2. C'est un processus dans lequel on doit
You can say it in English.
prendre les étapes
OK.
pour mettre en place les réglementations et probablement on doit avoir presque 1 an, mais si on peut procéder plus vite, ça serait très bien.
OK. Puis une autre question, puis M. Guilbeault, si vous voulez intervenir, n'hésitez pas. Pourquoi déclarer le plastique toxique quand on sait que il y a eu des réactions très fortes en Alberta? Pourquoi est-ce que c'est nécessaire de dire, tu sais, c'est toxique?
Nous n'avons pas dit ça.
Okay.
C'est le parti de la loi sur la protection de l'environnement, c'est Schedule 1. C'est une place dans laquelle on met les produits où nous devons avoir les réglementations en place pour assurer que les effets environnementaux n'est pas très nocifs. Et Schedule 1 a une norme qui s'appelle toxique. Mais j'ai dit que nous sommes ouverts d'avoir une conversation avec l'industrie, et j'ai dit ça à l'industrie, sur la norme de Schedule 1. Le gaz à effet de serre, c'est dans Schedule 1 aussi. C'est pas toxique comme un chimique qui fait les effets terribles si on laisse dans l'environnement. Mais c'est quelque chose qui fait les effets nocifs dans l'environnement. Et si c'est seulement un débat sur un mot, je suis ouvert d'avoir cette conversation.
OK. Ouais.
Je pense que Jonathan l'exprime bien. En fait, ce à quoi on assiste, c'est un relent historique de la façon dont la loi avait été élaborée à l'époque, et cette loi-là s'adressait à une époque lointaine essentiellement à ce qu'on appelait des produits toxiques. Alors qu'au fil des années, on a ajouté des éléments qui ne sont pas nécessairement des toxiques au sens chimique du terme, mais qui ont des impacts importants sur l'environnement. Et là, aujourd'hui, on ajoute le plastique, simplement que le titre n'a pas changé. Mais comme Jonathan dit, si la question, c'est seulement le titre, je pense que Jonathan, de toute évidence, est très ouvert à travailler là-dessus.
Merci.
Oui, bonjour. Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez bien sans mon masque. La question, c'est, bon, 6 produits comme ça, mais évidemment, il y a tous les produits d'emballage, par exemple, des produits à l'épicerie, par exemple, les plastiques, les syromousses. Pourquoi ne pas avoir été un petit peu plus loin dans ce sens-là? Est-ce que vous avez un plan pour aller vers ça? Tous les produits d'emballage qui sont jetés pour les produits qu'on achète un peu partout, pourquoi pas aller un petit peu plus loin? Ou est-ce que vous avez un plan pour aller plus loin dans ce sens-là?
Oui, bien sûr, nous avons un plan. Le papier de discussion, conversation, a dit que nous devons travailler avec les producteurs de plastique et les entreprises qui utilisent, comme les magasins d'alimentation, pour changer la méthode dans laquelle ils utilisent le plastique, pour assurer que les produits plastiques qui restent dans l'économie peuvent être recyclables. Et peut-être vous voulez...
Bien, c'est tout le concept de responsabilité élargie des producteurs. Donc, ce que Jonathan et son équipe vont faire au cours des prochains mois, c'est de travailler avec soit les producteurs ou les utilisateurs de ces produits-là pour s'assurer, puis ça s'est fait ailleurs dans le monde, si on regarde encore une fois du côté de l'Europe, mais dans d'autres pays aussi, que si on continue à utiliser ces produits-là, ils puissent être recyclables et que ce ne soient pas des produits qui se ramassent évidemment soit dans notre environnement ou dans les déchets. Oui. Alors, c'est l'un des éléments sur lequel Jonathan et l'équipe d'Environnement et Changement climatique Canada vont travailler au cours des prochains mois. OK.
Comme sous-question, évidemment, ce sont les municipalités qui sont généralement en charge de s'occuper du recyclage, compostage, etc. Mais les services qui sont offerts aux citoyens pour recycler sont variables d'une municipalité à l'autre. Certaines municipalités ont du succès, d'autres en ont moins. Les plus petites ont des difficultés aussi à le faire. Est-ce qu'on va imposer comme une norme pour pouvoir permettre aux gens, justement, d'avoir des services ou la possibilité de recycler là, ou de les utiliser, de les réutiliser?
Nous avons discuté et travaillé sur ce sujet avec les provinces et les territoires. Et je crois qu'il y a un accord que nous voulons mettre en place un système dans lequel les producteurs sont responsables pour assurer qu'un pourcentage de plastique va être recyclé. Les producteurs doivent avoir la responsabilité de collecter et d'assurer qu'il y a un pourcentage qui est recyclable, recyclé. Et parce que ça, les systèmes de recycler va être plus
Égal partout.
Oui, partout. Et que c'est quelque chose que l'industrie doit penser, mais je veux dire que l'industrie veut avoir ça, mais l'industrie veut avoir ça avec les règles qui sont presque les mêmes partout le Canada, parce que on doit avoir, je ne sais pas comment est-ce qu'on dit en français, mais economies of scale. On doit avoir ça. Pardon?
Économie d'échelle.
Économie d'échelle. Et si vous parlez avec Walmart, avec Canadian Tire, avec Loblaws, avec beaucoup des autres, ils vont dire que c'est une bonne étape pour assurer que presque toutes les municipalités peuvent avoir les choix.
OK, parfait. On va maintenant passer au téléphone. Il y aura une question et une suivie. We'll now go to questions on the phone. There'll be one question and one follow-up.
Thank you. If you have a question, please press star 1 to identify yourself to the operator. In the interest of time, please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Si vous avez une question, veuillez appuyer sur étoile 1 pour vous identifier auprès de la téléphoniste. En raison de contraintes de temps, veuillez vous limiter à une question et à une relance. Notre première question, our first question is from Marika Walsh from Globe and Mail. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Good morning, Minister. I'm wondering if you can confirm specifically when the ban will actually be in place for these 6 plastic items. It's my understanding you're saying the regulations will be finalized by the end of 2021. So when will we no longer see these things in grocery stores and kind of in our world?
There are, as I said, some steps, regulatory steps that we will have to go through, and it's difficult to say exactly when they will conclude, but certainly our aim is by the end of 2021.
Okay, and can you speak more specifically to the concerns raised by Alberta? Do you see your plan today as being out of step or in conflict with the plan that they released earlier? What specifically can you say about that?
Sorry, I missed part of your question. It's what would I say about the plan that Alberta released?
No, not specifically about the concerns from Alberta. So Alberta is saying, it seems to be suggesting that there's conflict between what your government is planning with the plastics ban and their plans to really scale up recycling of plastic.
No, I don't think there's any conflict. And in fact, I applaud the government of Alberta's commitment in the announcement yesterday to circularity and to looking to build a center of excellence around recycling. I think that's exactly what we're saying in terms of the economic opportunity associated with this initiative. I think that Alberta has expressed some concerns about the ban. I would simply say that the ban is a very small part of the plastics industry in Canada and the utilization of plastic in Canada. And it is really focused on those specific items that are very hard to recycle. So it's hard to see how it would have any significant bearing on the development of a recycling industry. But as I say, I applaud the work that Alberta is doing. I think it's very much consistent with what we're announcing today.
Thank you. Merci. Notre prochaine question est de Émilie Bergeron de l'agence QMI. À vous la parole, please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Wilkinson. Vous avez insisté depuis tout à l'heure sur l'importance
d'augmenter le recyclage, mais comment se fait-il que le Canada n'a pas d'objectif encore pour cette proportion de être recyclé? Je vois par exemple que dans la charte sur laquelle le Canada a adhéré, on parle de recycler ou réutiliser 55% d'ici 2030. On est en 2020, comment on peut arriver à 55% en 2030?
Comme j'ai dit, aujourd'hui, nous avons mettre en place un papier pour conversation sur le plan. Et il y a beaucoup de choses que nous devons développer avec les provinces et territoires et avec les Canadiens pour avoir les étapes spécifiques pour faire les progrès avec le pourcentage de recyclés, mais aussi pour avoir beaucoup plus de contient des produits viennent de produits qui sont recyclages. Et bien sûr, nous voulons annoncer les étapes spécifiques, mais pas aujourd'hui. Nous devons avoir la conversation. Bien sûr, les provinces et les territoires sont très importants dans cette conversation. Bien sûr, les municipalités sont importantes dans cette conversation. Et nous voulons prendre le temps pour avoir une approche qui est partout le Canada et dans laquelle il y a un accord avec tous les gouvernements provinciaux et fédéraux.
OK. Et quel est votre échéancier pour définir cet objectif pour augmenter le taux de recyclage? On connaît l'échéance pour cette interdiction de 6 produits, donc la fin 2021, mais ça va devoir se faire visiblement en même temps. Donc, c'est quoi votre échéance pour fixer cet objectif?
Well, bien sûr, nous avons mettre en place une cible de zéro déchet plastique par 2030 et nous devons prendre les étapes, bien sûr, dans les prochains mois et prochains ans pour faire le progrès, pour assurer que nous pouvons atteindre le cible. Mais aujourd'hui, je n'ai pas exactement le temps. Je dois avoir beaucoup plus de conversations avec mes collègues des provinces et territoires. C'est quelque chose que le Conseil des ministres de l'Environnement partout le Canada a discuté durant 2 ou 3 ans. Et bien sûr, nous sommes en accord que nous devons faire plus et nous devons avoir un plan et le plan doit être quelque chose que c'est quelque chose qui est un plan pour tout, pas seulement pour le niveau fédéral.
Merci. Thank you. Following question is from Maura Forrest from Politico. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Nearly 70 U.S. industry groups have written to you and other ministers recently warning that a plastics ban could violate Canada's obligations under the NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. Are you at all worried that this ban could result in trade action?
No, I am not. I think those concerns that are being expressed are simply wrong. This proposal is really focused on ensuring that we're treating all products, irrespective of whether they're manufactured here or elsewhere, are treated in the same way. I do not see a trade concern. I think that for those that express it, they should reach out and contact us, and I'd be happy to ensure that they are briefed.
Okay, thanks. And my follow-up is just polls have shown that public support for a plastics ban has dropped somewhat during the pandemic as people obviously have switched to using more single-use plastics. do you worry that you don't enjoy the same high degree of public support for this that you seemed to back in 2019?
Well, I think that the Canadians want to ensure that we're doing this in a thoughtful way. They certainly want us to address the issue of plastics in the environment. As I said, I mean, when you have a group of tour boat operators who are, on behalf of the government of BC, going up the coast to try to clean up plastics on the beaches and in the water, and in less than a month, they basically take out of the water 127 tons of plastic, there's a problem. There's a huge problem, and people know that. The fact that the drinking water that you are consuming, whether you're consuming it from a water bottle, a plastic water bottle, or from your tap, has microplastics in it, that's an enormous problem. And so I think they want us to address it. They just want to make sure that we're doing it thoughtfully. And what we have done is exactly that. The ban, people focus a lot. And I would say to you, if you put up the number of plastic products that we use, the ban is probably a fraction of 1% of the products. What we're talking about by and large is about enhancing the rate at which we're recycling, reusing those products, and keeping those materials in our economy. With respect to the 6 items on the ban, those are things for which there are readily available alternatives. And to be honest with you, most of the folks that actually sell products have moved away or are in the process of moving away from those already. I mean, A&W got rid of plastic straws a long time ago. So did Starbucks. So did a whole range of other companies. And so the beer, the 6-pack plastic rings. I mean, most of the breweries in Canada have gone away from that some time ago. So what I would say to you is this is a thoughtful approach that actually addresses the specific issues that are harmful and difficult to recycle, but does it in a way that ensures that there are readily available alternatives. And for the vast, vast majority of plastics, many of which Canadians do rely on in a significant way, what we're talking about is greatly enhancing the rate at which we're actually reusing those. And that is exactly what Canadians, I think, want us to do.
Thank you. Following our last question, notre dernière question est de David Lundgren from Reuters, Ottawa. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Yes, thank you. Minister, I'm a bit confused about the timeline. You talk about establishing performance standards for plastic products to reduce their impact. You talk about ensuring end-of-life responsibility. Can you talk me through a little bit of the process to how you're going to do that, and more importantly, at what point you will be announcing binding obligations on companies to fulfill these demands?
So, as I said, this is a conversation that we have been and will be having with provinces and territories. I think it's important that we are working collaboratively to try to establish national standards and ensuring that they are going to work in a way that's consistent across the country. As most of the producers or the purveyors of plastic products will tell you, they need economies of scale in order to make extended producer responsibility and their obligations to collect and recycle affordable. And so that's a key piece. And so we are going to make sure that we are working with provinces and territories to put those things in place. Obviously, there is some degree of urgency in terms of moving this along, and I think all of the provinces and territories understand that. Many are already moving to put in place extended producer responsibility. It exists in British Columbia. A number of the other provinces have indicated that they will be putting that in place over the next number of months, or in the next year or so. And some of the recycled content standards and the actual target recycling rates are things that we will be working with them on. But obviously, we recognize that we need to do that quickly.
Do you have any kind of timeline, months, years on this one?
Well, in terms of working through that, I mean, I don't control the provinces and territories, but I would say that certainly from an objective perspective, I would certainly like to get this done within the next 12 to 24 months.
Great, thanks.
Okay, ceci conclut la conférence de presse. This will finalize the press conference. Thank you everyone for attending.